The Polestar 2 finally has a larger sibling. It's called the Polestar 3. Indeed, the SUV offers far greater capacity both in terms of the boot and also the amount of space you've got within the cabin. Now, the price starts from £70,000, at least at the time filming and in the UK, and that is for the long-range single motor. If you want a dual motor, this will cost you roughly £75,000, and if you want dual motor with the performance pack, it'll cost you upwards of £81,000. So in this review, you can see if it's actually worth this price tag and how it compares to some of its key competitors. So to kick things off, let's talk about its electric range. And here you have got a whopping 111 kilowatt hour battery pack. 107 kilowatt hour is actually usable, and that comes fitted as standard across the entire trim range, at least at the time of filming and in the UK. What is also standard is a heat pump, which is certainly appreciated for those colder climate scenarios, because it effectively will give you a more efficient system. Now, in terms of the range claims, the manufacturer says that the long-range single motor will give you the best range at 403 miles, at least according to the WLTP test cycle. This then moves down to 392 miles in the long-range dual motor, and if you were to add the performance pack, this further drops down to 348 miles. Now, for my own mixed driving test, I actually netted a very respectable 260 to 280 miles. And while it's not exactly class leading, specifically if you look at some of its competitors, I do think its overall electric range will suffice for the vast majority of consumers. Now, for you to be as efficient as possible, and indeed for you to get the best sort of range, you might want to enable regenerative braking. And this is done via the infotainment system, where you can enable or indeed disable one pedal drive. Now, it's great to see the degree of customization, not only by enabling one pedal drive, but also if you do not want that harshness, or at least that extreme harshness as such, you can reduce it. Or of course, if you're more accustomed to a regular engine or ICE based vehicle, shall I say, then you can effectively have it just to coast when you lift off the accelerator pedal. I personally really love one pedal drive, and furthermore the option to enable and disable it, because when I'm going in and around the city and I lift off the accelerator pedal, the vehicle will come to a complete standstill. Now, aside from recouping energy while on the move, you can of course plug it in, and via CCS port it will take up to 250 kilowatts of input, and therefore if you do find an appropriate DC rapid charger, you can go from 10 to 80% in just half an hour. Now, via its Type 2 port, you will be pleased to know that the vehicle has got an 11 kilowatt onboard charger, and therefore means that if you have got access to a 3-phase wall box, you can go from 0 to 100% in 11 hours. This does go up to 17 hours if indeed you have a regular 7 kilowatt wall box, and of course will take a lot longer if you're just plugging it in via regular 3-pin inputs. So past efficiency, what about when it comes to performance? Well, here it very much depends as to which model you go for. In the long-range single motor, you have got a rear-wheel drive configuration, and therefore a motor planted on the rear axle, which gives you 220 kilowatts of power, or 295 horsepower, and 490 newton meters of torque. It's claimed to go from 0 to 60 miles an hour in 7.5 seconds, and has got a top speed of 112 miles an hour. Now, the long-range dual motor has got an all-wheel drive configuration thanks to a motor planted on the front and rear axle, and has got 360 kilowatts of power, and that equates to 483 horsepower. It's also got 840 newton meters torque, and is claimed to go from 0 to 60 miles an hour in 4.8 seconds. Top speed goes up to 130 miles an hour. Now, if you were to add the performance pack on top of the long-range dual motor, you'll have 380 kilowatts of power, or 510 horsepower, 910 newton meters of torque, and a 0 to 60 mile an hour claim of just 4.5 seconds. Top speed is the same as the other dual motor model at 130 miles an hour. Now, I actually had the dual motor model tested using RaceLogic's Performance Box Touch from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 1.52 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 2.25 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in just 4.94 seconds, and in 50 to 70 miles an hour in 2.47 seconds. I also clocked in a peak acceleration of 0.69 G. So the Polestar 3 is blisteringly quick, but what about when it comes to its handling characteristics? Well, here you have got torque vectoring, at least on the all-wheel drive models, and it is actually a work of art. When you're going around a corner and applying some power, the vehicle does actually turn in extremely tightly. However, I do feel that the steering wheel is a little bit disjointed from the front axle. At least that is the perception I had. Even on terms of its stiff mode steering wheel preset, which you can select via the infotainment system, I felt that the vehicle just felt a little bit disjointed. In fact, even when you start up the car, it almost feels like the steering wheel kind of unlocks before you can actually utilize it. I'll be curious if you've driven the Polestar 3 to actually share your own driving experiences down in the comment section below, and how you feel it compares to some of its competitors, namely those vehicles that are a bit more centered towards that sort of driving dynamics. Now, in terms of the suspension system, you have got an adaptive one that comes fitted as standard across the entire trim range. And while it's very much appreciated, and the fact that you can actually adjust it on the fly via the infotainment system, I do feel that sometimes you can hear the rebound occurring throughout the cabin. I'm not sure if you can pick it there. My microphone probably won't pick it up, but it's kind of like some low-end resonance that kind of translates and comes into the cabin, and it's not exactly a pleasurable noise. And while it only occurs sometimes when you're going over slightly uneven terrain, it's not something I'd come to expect in a premium SUV. Now, it is still pretty comfortable to drive, and the vehicle does soak up a lot of the anomalies, the speed bumps and the potholes. And furthermore, when you're going around winding country routes at speed, it does actually feel pretty planted. That's also aided by the fact that the all-wheel drive model has got a perfect 50-50 weight distribution, and of course that low center of gravity due to the positioning of the battery pack. Now, it's worth pointing out that the rear-wheel drive model, or at least a single motor model, will not have that same 50-50 weight distribution, but rather will probably sit at 48 to 52% split. Now, to just expand on this, you have got an adaptive self-leveling dual chamber air suspension system, and here you've got ZF active dampers as well. Now, at the front you have got a dual wishbone setup, while at the rear you're treated with an integral link. So past all of that, what about when it comes to its interior? Well, the overall look and feel is certainly very premium, from the materials that have been chosen by the dashboard to the doors, and even in terms of the upholstery work and even the stitching. It all very much looks the part. Furthermore, it's also got a very nice design. And by that I mean you have got capacitive and haptic buttons that are found on the steering wheel, and yes, they are actually pretty responsive and very intuitive to use, although I would have preferred physical buttons, but it's still good use by the manufacturer. And then you've also got a 14.5-inch portrait display. Now, at the bottom you will find a few key sections, for example ones that can adjust your climate, or indeed ones that are effectively your recent apps. So it's good thinking by the manufacturer, because they've actually eradicated pretty much every physical button other than a small little rotary dial that is found towards the center console, and that serves as your volume control. Now, in terms of the display itself, is extremely responsive. I've got no issues whatsoever, and that's because it's running Android's Automotive OS. And indeed over here, it means that you have got perfect integration with Google Maps, and when you are going via doing certain, let's say, route planning, then the vehicle will automatically determine if it's actually plausible with the amount of battery that you've got. So it'll read that state, and therefore goes a step further than vehicles that just simply have Android Auto. Now, it's worth noting that you have also got CarPlay support, so in case you are an iPhone user, don't fret, you will still be able to use the infotainment system, at least with your iPhone, and the same would go with an Android, where you've got Android Auto, but of course you've got the Android Automotive OS, which is of course baked in. Now, you've also got voice control, which is very responsive and does exactly what it says on the tin. You can do a variety of different commands in terms of, for example, with the car, or indeed if you just want to navigate, and that is of course due to Google's Assistant, which is built in. And then you have also got a pretty nice driver's display. It sits at 9-inch to be more specific. It's fully digitalized and also further integrates Google Maps directly into it, so you can also have a quick glance of your directions just by looking at the driver's display. Now, to go that one step further, you have got the head-up display, although this is only comprised within the Plus pack, and it's worth bearing in mind over here you'll also need the Pilot pack, where each cost £5,000 and £2,300 respectively, setting you back a whopping £7,300. Now, within this you will have headrest speakers, active noise reduction, a head-up display, and also acoustic lower rear window. But the real standout over here is the 25-speaker Bowers & Wilkins system, which outputs a whopping 1,610 watts. It also has got Dolby Atmos technology, which is a massive step up over the stock 10-speaker 300-watt system. Now, having actually tested the Dolby Atmos setup within this car, I must say it's absolutely mind-blowing. It's the first that I've ever come across in a vehicle, and I do think it's actually the very first integration of Dolby Atmos within a car, and it does give you a really nice, almost cinematic feel while you're just listening to music, almost like the vocals come straight in front of you, and it's just really, really incredible. You'll have to sit inside the vehicle and experience it for yourself, and make sure if you're going to be demoing the vehicle to use the likes of Tidal and have a Dolby Atmos playlist for you to get the best sort of experience. Even without Dolby Atmos, the Bowers & Wilkins system does a tremendous job across the sound frequency range, and I do think it's a worthwhile upgrade, at least if you can afford it, with the different packs that I just mentioned. So next up we get onto storage, and at the front you've got the glove box, which will suffice for taking smaller size valuables. The same could be said about the little area that is found underneath the center armrest. Now further up the center console you've got two cup holders, and then you've also got a angled wireless charger. It's quite handy because if you're going to be accelerating in the Polestar 3, your smartphone is not going to be flung backwards. Now underneath the center console you'll find a very large open area which has got a non-slip material. Quite handy if you've got a rucksack or, for example, a medium to large size purse. Further in front of this you'll also find a small little area which can be handy for taking documents, and also two USB Type-C ports. There are further two USB Type-C ports for charging only at the rear of the center console for, of course, your rear occupants. Now as for the door bins, the front two are large enough for accommodating a 500ml bottle alongside some small to medium sized valuables, and the rear two are unsurprisingly a little bit more limited. However, it's great to see that all the door bins have been lined in a non-slip material, which prevents any sort of loose keys or change from rattling around when you're traversing uneven terrain. Elsewhere at the rear of the cabin you have got a pull-down armrest, which also reveals two cup holders which are sleekly designed within the unit itself. Now of course when it comes to storage we have to talk about its boot, and here you've got 484 litres to play around with, or if you drop down the seats 1411 litres. Sure enough, it's not exactly class-leading figures, but it should certainly suffice for the vast majority of consumers. What I really do like, however, is the fact that it's very practical. You've got 60/40 rear split folding seats with an integrated ski latch, you've got a flat boot floor, and also a sizable underfloor compartment, which is quite handy for taking your charging cables. Better still, you've got an electric tailgate and a hatchback design, all of which that comes fitted as standard. In fact, over here there is a loading mode which will bring down the rear suspension by 40mm, making it easier to access the rear of the vehicle. Now it's worth noting over here that if you do want the foldable load floor, it is available in the Plus pack, which will cost you £5,000, and it is also required to get the Pilot pack at £2,300. And therefore, if you do want this luxury, you'll have to spend a whopping £7,300. Now what is included as standard, however, is a front compartment. This is only electronically released and then manually closed, but will provide you a sizable 32 litres of capacity. Aside from transporting goods, what about when it comes to seating comfort? Well, at the front, the seats themselves are very accommodating and soft. I had no issues whatsoever. Furthermore, it's good to see that they're heated and also electronically controlled as standard. At the rear, the same could be said, where the seats are actually very comfortable and provide you fantastic headroom and legroom. As someone who's just under 6 foot, I had no issues whatsoever. This is in part due to the fact that the manufacturer has also optimized the rear footwell design by giving you a completely flat floor. Now it is worth mentioning that the panoramic roof does come fitted as standard. However, if you do want a sunshade, it'll cost you an additional £150. On that note, what is actually really shocking is that if you want heated rear seats and a steering wheel, an air quality system, soft door close, and a power operated steering column, you'll have to splash out £7,300. That's because you'll have to go for the £5,000 Plus pack and then add the £2,300 Pilot pack, which in my opinion I do find quite ridiculous. Now I'd be curious to know what you think of those options down in the comment section below, and equally, what are your thoughts about its overall exterior design? In my opinion, I really do love what the automaker has achieved with the Polestar 3, because it doesn't give that sort of traditional SUV vibe. But in all honesty, it's actually quite similar to the Polestar 4 and Polestar 2, which is potentially not a bad thing, but doesn't exactly stand out as more of a premium vehicle. Nonetheless, at the front you've got a really nice design when it comes to its headlights and also when it comes to its front bumper. And at the side you've got 20-inch alloys which come fitted as standard. If you do want 21-inch alloys, it'll set you back £1,000, or you can also have 21-inch alloys in the Pro Pack, which will set you back £1,800. There are also 22-inch alloys, which are available for £2,800, or also within the Performance Pack. It is a shame, however, that when it comes to its sidal profile, that the manufacturer has not given you body-coloured wheel arches. Now, as for the rear, you've got that robust and sporty look, which is due to the fact that you've got an integrated spoiler, a tail light that stretches the entire width of the vehicle, and a pretty chunky feel to the back of the vehicle in comparison to what you'll find at the front. Now, in terms of the towing capacity, for the long-range single motor, it's rated at 1,500 kilograms, while the dual motor model goes up to 2,200 kilograms. In terms of your roof load capacity, it sits at 100 kilograms, although you will need a load carrier, which will cost you an additional £300. Now, in terms of your colour options, magnesiums comes as standard. However, the other options are available between £1,000 to £1,400. Past its exterior design, it brings me on to safety, and at the time of filming it's not been tested by Euro NCAP, so I can't give you any sort of crash analysis. However, basing it on Volvo/Polestar's pedigree and also even the Polestar 2, it should be a pretty safe vehicle. However, what I can talk about are the driver assistance systems, and as standard you've got a whole bunch of them included, such as driver monitoring system, blind spot information system, exit assist, forward collision avoidance, road sign information, lane keeping aids, oncoming lane mitigation, runoff mitigation, and also adaptive cruise control, which does actually work a treat by keeping you at a safe distance from the leading vehicle and not feeling overly jerky. However, if you want to go one step further, you can go for the Pilot Pack, which will add Pilot Assist and also Lane Change Assist. This also gives you 360-degree cameras. It will set you back £2,300, but it's a worthwhile consideration if you just want some extra assistance on the motorway and also to give you a bit more peace of mind. Now, should you want to go a step further, you can go for the Pilot Pack with LiDAR, and this will set you back an additional £4,300 on top of the Pilot Pack and therefore will cost £6,600. This is supposedly going to be giving you better autonomous driving capabilities like you'd find on some rival automakers such as BMW and even Tesla. Now, to round off, I would like to talk about parking and visibility. And starting off with the former, you've got an 11.8 meter turning circle, which means it's actually very easy to maneuver in a tight space. Furthermore, you've got sensors, a rear camera, and also even a cleaning function. And therefore means that if you're going to be traversing on muddier terrain, you can actually quickly clean the camera. Better still, you've also got rear cross traffic alert with an active braking system, therefore giving you extra peace of mind if you're going to be reversing out of a parking space. Speaking of which, do remember that if you want the 360-degree cameras, you'll have to splash out an additional £2,300 on the Pilot Pack. Now, as for visibility, I had no issues whatsoever towards the front and side, and at the rear it is a little bit more limited due to the overall design of this SUV, but you have got a rear wiper, which is handy in certain scenarios. So with all that in mind, it brings us on to our verdict of the Polestar 3. And truthfully, the manufacturer's really done a good job with this SUV. You've got plenty of storage capacity, you have got a good amount of legroom and headroom for both the front and rear occupants, a very stylish exterior design, and also plenty of technology and driver assistance systems that are found within the cabin. The key thing to take away, however, is for the overall performance and the range. Can you see yourself buying a better car for £70,000, or let alone if you're going to be spending upwards of £75,000 for the dual motor model or with the performance pack of £81,000? Now, I'd be curious to know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and if you've enjoyed this video, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.